Tel Lachish is a dry hill of rock and dust in central Israel, an archaeological mound where a massive ancient city folds into the landscape. To understand this world, we usually rely on voices with an agenda. Kings carved their victories into stone to project absolute power, and prophets wrote to convey theological truth. These ancient records were almost always written by the victors or the faithful, and they are heavy with bias. Historians look to the physical debris for a different kind of witness. The layers of earth record the grit and heat of events as they actually happened, providing a tangible check against the claims made in the ancient scrolls. At this site, that physical record is immense. At its height, Lachish was the most formidable palace fortress in the Kingdom of Judea. The royal complex built on this hill was physically larger than the one standing in Jerusalem. Because this city was systematically obliterated by the world's greatest superpowers, it left behind a series of locked time capsules. These ruined layers allow us to test the grand narratives of the ancient world against the uncompromising reality of the dirt. In the ancient Near East, the city gate functioned as the civic heart of the community. This was where the local population paid taxes, held court, and maintained their own religious shrines. The biblical Book of Kings describes a sudden kingdom-wide religious purge led by King Hezekiah. He reportedly ordered the destruction of these local worship sites to centralize all religious and political power exclusively in Jerusalem. Inside the fortified gatehouse at Lachish, archaeologists uncovered a small, specific cultic room. Inside, they found a square stone altar featuring the 4 distinct horns characteristic of Judean worship. The stone horns of this altar were deliberately smashed off. And placed directly on top of the ruined surface was a heavy, crudely carved stone toilet seat. Chemical analysis of the surrounding soil shows the seat was never actually used. It was placed there as a targeted, symbolic insult, a permanent end to local worship that physically demonstrates the aggressive centralization described in the biblical text. In 701 BCE, the timeline at Lachish shifts to a moment of total war. The Assyrian Empire, the world's first true military superpower, marched south with the goal of crushing the Judean rebellion. The Assyrian king Sennacherib recorded his victory on the walls of his palace in Nineveh. His royal records describe the Judean king trapped, quote, like a bird in a cage, framing the conquest as an effortless display of imperial dominance. The Assyrians dedicated artwork to the siege of Lachish. These carvings show specialized siege engines and battering rams pushed against defensive towers. Along the bottom, conquerors depicted the human cost, local archers falling from walls, and prisoners led away to be impaled. The artwork makes victory look inevitable, but the engineering was staggering. To reach the walls, laborers piled over 9,000 tons of rock and mud plaster against the steep hill, building a massive siege ramp by hand under constant fire. The defense was just as intense. Inside the walls, the inhabitants built their own massive counter-ramp to stay above the Assyrian machines. Excavations in this debris recovered over 1,000 arrowheads, marking the exact point where the 2 ramps met. While the royal texts brag of a swift victory, the dirt reveals a war of attrition, a terrifying engineering battle that pushed the world's greatest army to its absolute limit. By 586 BCE, the region was facing a new threat, the Babylonians. The Book of Jeremiah records the final days of the kingdom, noting that Lachish and Azekah were the very last walled cities left standing in the Judean countryside. In the 1930s, a British expedition dug into the thick layer of Babylonian ash at the gatehouse, looking for evidence of those final days. Mixed in the debris, they found the Lachish ostraca, pottery shards used for military dispatches, written in desperate Paleo-Hebrew. One reads, "We are watching for the fire signals of Lachish, because we cannot see Azekah." This ink captures the literal darkness as a neighboring city's signal fire went out. It provides a physical record of the exact moment the defensive line failed, a real-time look at a collapse that precisely follows the biblical narrative. Today, Tel Lachish has returned to a state of quiet. But beneath the soil, the hill remains a dense historical ledger, recording the politics and terror of the ancient world. Reading the polished boasts of kings or the theological summaries of prophets only tells half the story. The human scale of history is found where those legendary words intersect with the debris buried in the dirt. At Lachish, the rocks and the ash ensure that the truth of those moments is never entirely lost.